All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, it's been a hell of a week for the Big East Conference as the week began with UConn head coach Dan Hurley spurning the Los Angeles Lakers when they were trying to lure him west to become their next head coach as he decided to remain in stores. And now the league is on the verge of adding some new broadcast partners to its new television deal. Now, according to Andrew Marchand of The Athletic, the Big East is closing in on adding TNT and NBC as broadcast partners for their men's and women's basketball games, while also continuing to do business with Fox Sports as well. Now, this would begin for the 2025-2026 season, and terms have yet to be disclosed on the deal. But one would have to imagine, with Fox on board, along with TNT and NBC, the Big East will get a pretty penny out of this deal. It's not going to be football money for collegiate athletics, but nonetheless, I think the Big East is going to come out of this smelling like a rose. Now, clearly, at the end of the day, the Big East has what the networks want, which is a quality product of basketball. And to me, this is not bad for a league that was left for dead 11 years ago. You think about it, the Big East, out of all of the power conferences at the time, all their power football conferences, they were always in a different realm, if you will. Why? Because they had some schools in their league that were non football schools, and then you had some schools that were just basketball schools. And everybody wasn't on equal footing. That changed, of course, through college football realignment. And then, it's one of those where when we saw the football schools leave the Big East or get kicked out of the Big East, basically, back in 2013, the league was left for dead because nobody expected what the Big East could or could not do. But to their credit, they got back to their basketball roots, and those basketball schools have been committed to one another. And I think it was a huge move several years ago when the Big East decided to welcome Connecticut back into their fray. Because I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it. UConn was a lost cause, so to speak, in the American Athletic Conference. They were like a fish out of water out there, okay? It's one of those that league was spread out. UConn has never been known as a football powerhouse. It's been their basketball programs, both men and women's. And I think being that they're back in the Big East, being that they're back in their roots, it's showing. We just saw Gino Auriemma get the Lady Huskies to the Final Four this year, and then of course we just saw Dan Hurley lead Connecticut to their second consecutive national championship. And then as a whole, this is a strong league from top to bottom. I mean, first and foremost, it starts with the coaches. I mean, it's a who's who of coaches. And the Big East, when you think about basketball, even back to this league's heyday in the 1980s, it was always about the coaches. And you have a strong coaching room for the Big East. You got Rick Pitino at St. John's, Dan Hurley at Connecticut, Shaka Smart at Marquette, Greg McDermott at Creighton, Kim English at Providence, Ed Cooley at Georgetown, okay, Sean Miller at Xavier. You got Thad Matta at Butler, okay, Shaheen Holloway at Seton Hall. So you have a strong room of coaches in this league. And I think that's what it comes down to. I know that the landscape of collegiate athletics is continuing to change due to the NIL. But I think what we've seen from the Big East over the years, this is a league that knows how to roll with the punches. They know how to adjust and adapt. And once again, I think they'll be okay. So credit to Big East Conference Commissioner Val Ackerman. I don't think that she gets enough credit for the job that she has done and the job that she continues to do as she stewards this league. Because when we saw the breakup of the original Big East 11 years ago. This league needed stability, and this is what Commissioner Ackerman has brought to this league. You think about it, their original deal with Fox, which goes back to 2013, and now them getting a new deal, or basically it's probably done at this point. But it's one of those, like, the final I's have to be dotted and the T's have to be crossed and so forth. But nonetheless, now it's not just a Fox thing, because when you have other networks coming in and wanting to talk turkey with you, it means they see something there. There's an appeal of your product. Okay, so now you got three networks there for you, and I think it's going to be the perfect marriage, because Fox has understood, the need for broadcasting collegiate athletics, the money that's there, both football and basketball wise. TNT is really getting into the fold, and I'm going to touch on them a little bit more in a minute. But you've seen us, what they've been doing now, with MLB on TBS. Then, of course, the NCAA tournament to deal with Turner and CBS. Then TNT has an NHL package. They're trying to work at the 11th hour on an NBA deal to still maintain their footing there. And then NBC getting back into the college basketball fray. There's a younger generation that doesn't know that pre-CBS, NBC used to televise the NCAA tournament, and it was a consistent thing where you had college basketball games on the weekends nationally televised on NBC. And I think NBC is looking to get back into that. Of course, they have the ability with streaming, with Peacock as well. So this is going to give the Big East schools, both basketball wise, both men's and women's, another avenue for their products. So, with all of that said, with this new television deal on the horizon, I've talked about this before. Should the Big East look to expand? I think it could possibly happen. It's one of those where I think the Big East is only going to push the envelope if they truly want to. I know when I did talk about this subject several months ago, I brought up schools like Dayton. I also brought up Gonzaga. And I think, Gonzaga is happy on the West Coast right now. We've seen the West Coast Conference attempt to make some improvements to their league for the next couple of years. We see Grand Canyon and Seattle joining the West Coast Conference, while also Oregon State and Washington State will be basketball members, as well as some other sports, while they are looking to rebuild the Pac-12 conference. So I think Gonzaga is staying put in the West Coast, and I thought it was a reach at best to ask them to join the Big East. Okay, but nonetheless, I think if the Big East really does want to expand, I do think that the best school for them to add would be Dayton, because for me, it would have to be a big time player, big enough as far as being a non football school that the Big East could look to add. And I think Dayton, to me, checks all of the boxes. I know that the Big East has a school in Ohio already in the form of Xavier. I've talked about the possibility of, a rivalry in that state between Xavier and Dayton, within the Big East. There are other schools that could make sense, like a Loyola of Chicago. Um, for me, Temple would make sense. Temple has always made sense for the Big East, but I doubt that's going to happen. I don't see Villanova sharing the Philadelphia market with them, because Temple, like Connecticut, has been a fish out of water in the American Athletic Conference, and I think they're going to continue to be that. I think Temple should try to go the UConn route, just be a football independent and try to be a basketball school. Go back to focusing on basketball, whether that be in the A10, Big East, or any place else. But nonetheless, I think if the Big East was truly, and I mean truly, on board with being with looking for expansion, I think Dayton makes the most sense, because, like I said, they check all of the boxes. But this right here, I think, is a win for everybody involved. I think it's a win for Fox. We see the basketball coverage that Fox has produced for not only the Big East, but the Big Ten Conference as well. I think it's a win for NBC as they are looking to get back onto the college basketball scene. They're getting back onto the basketball scene because they're going to be a part of the NBA's new television package, and I think it's also a win for TNT as well. And then, of course, this gives the Big East more avenues of exposure. Now, getting back to TNT, and this is what I wanted to talk about earlier, I think it would be nice, okay, if TNT could work out something with the NBA. Why? Because you would then, in my opinion, clearly, keep, your centerpieces, Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, Ernie Johnson, and Shaquille O'Neal working together. You'd keep some of your tremendous broadcasting teams working together as well. But then you could also use them in college basketball. And if anybody has watched the NCAA tournament over the last couple of years with this deal with CBS and Turner, you know that Charles Barkley and Kenny Smith have provided their opinions during the during the studio work for the NCAA tournament. We've also heard the likes of Reggie Miller do color commentary for games, and then just to have them back doing that for the collegiate game full time would be great. And of course, it would cut down on the potential allure from them going to another network. But nonetheless, I think this Big East conference is headed in the right direction. It's one of those where at its beginning, back in 1979, there were some that did not think that this league would last. Okay, under the watch of the late great Dave Gavitt, the original commissioner of the Big East, and it took the Big East just 3 years before they got a team in the national championship game in the form of Georgetown. 2 years later, Georgetown won it, and even to this day, and it's a record that is going to be touched at some point, okay, due to the expanded leagues. You've got a 16-team SEC, an 18-team Big Ten, okay, a 16-team Big 12 coming on our horizon, a 17-team SEC. But you think about it, it's been nearly 40 years. With all of that said, since we had three teams from one conference make the Final Four, and of course the Big East did it. The Big East is the only conference to do it, going back to '85 when Georgetown, St. John's, and Villanova all met up in Lexington for the Final Four that year. We've seen multiple conferences get to. We've seen the ACC get to a couple of times, the Big 12 get to a couple of times, the Big 10, the Big East, but nobody has gotten three teams. It's going to happen eventually, like I said, with these expanded conferences now and the conferences that will continue to expand. But nonetheless, this league was not counted on at first, and it showed its muscle basketball wise during the 1980s. It showed its muscle during the 1990s with the amount of guys that they were sending to the NBA, going back to back in 2003 and 2004 with Syracuse and Connecticut winning respectively. You go back to 2009, the only conference to have three number one seeds ever in the same NCAA tournament as Connecticut, Pitt, and Louisville all did it that year. And then being left to hung out to dry, so to speak, back in 2013. These basketball schools have stuck together. They've stuck to their principles. And you look at this team, or you look at this league rather, they are now solidified. This is the best non-football conference in the nation as far as basketball goes. All right. And I think the networks realize that. The networks understand that as well. Like I said the other day, it was a big win for the league and college basketball, but especially the Big East with Dan Hurley coming back. And it's going to be compelling as the network's going to battle to, televise the likes of St. John's versus Connecticut and so forth during the upcoming college basketball season. And one thing that I didn't mention, and I'm going to mention now, I mentioned TNT, I mentioned Fox, I mentioned NBC. Let's not forget CBS also does get some games out of this deal as well for the Big East Conference, whether it be on the CBS Sports Network or, of course, on weekends on CBS nationally. But nonetheless, big time win for the Big East, a strong week for the Big East. And let's see where this Power Basketball League goes from here. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank all of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast. here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 pounds of sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.